The cabin sat quietly by the lake, cradled between towering pine trees and kissed by the soft ripples of crystal clear water. It had been my sanctuary for years, my escape from the concrete and constant noise of the city. No cell signal, no traffic, no nosy neighbors. Just silence, birdsong, and the occasional crackle of firewood in the stone hearth. I built it with my own hands during long weekends and late summers, and when I finally retired from my SWAT unit, this is where I came to breathe again. I thought I'd found peace. I didn't realize peace made some people uncomfortable. From the moment the HOA president, Karen, of course, heard about my cabin, she treated it like a personal insult. It wasn't even within her jurisdiction. Technically, the HOA ended a full quarter-mile from my gravel driveway, but Karen had a way of pushing lines and assuming power where none existed. She came by once, uninvited, on a Sunday afternoon. I was chopping wood, sweat pouring off my brow, when I heard her heels crunching on the path like a rattlesnake's warning. She had a clipboard in hand and a sour expression baked into her face. "This structure is not compliant with community standards," she declared before even saying hello. I looked her up and down. "This structure is not in your community." That didn't stop her. She kept showing up, sometimes alone, sometimes with other HOA board members in tow, peering into my windows, photographing my truck, questioning why I didn't have a lawn sign declaring approval from their architectural committee. I told her once, bluntly, that if she set foot on my land again, she'd be trespassing. I wasn't bluffing, but Karen wasn't used to being told no. She took it as a challenge. I should have known, then she wouldn't stop. By the second month of her games, my mailbox started getting flooded, notices, threats of fines, cease, and desist letters printed with HOA letterhead. I ignored them all. They had no legal weight here, and she knew it. But her obsession didn't stop. It escalated. One evening, just as the sun dipped behind the ridge and bathed the lake in gold, I noticed a drone buzzing over the cabin. It hovered for a few minutes, then zipped back toward the HOA neighborhood. A week later, strange vehicles started parking just down the dirt road from the cabin, dark SUV, no plates, tinted windows. At first, I thought maybe hunters or weekend hikers, but their behavior was off. They never went into the woods, never made noise, never even left trash. Just sat, watched, left, then came the fake sirens. I was working in the shed when I heard them, 2 short bursts, like a patrol car's chirp, but the tone wasn't quite right. I peeked through the trees. A white Crown Vic crept down the road, lights flashing, but no markings. The men who got out wore dark shirts that said Community Safety Patrol in bold yellow letters. They walked up to my gate like they had every right to be there. "We're here for a code inspection," one of them said, waving a laminated ID badge that could have been printed at a mall kiosk. I didn't argue, I didn't even answer. I just memorized every face, every detail, then closed the gate gently in their faces. Back inside, I opened the secure line. It had been a while since I contacted the unit. But when you've served with people long enough, bonds don't break. I sent one message: Lake House, uninvited guests, surveillance, false authority, possible breach incoming. Within minutes, replies came flooding in. "Got your 6. Already camping 2 clicks out. Eyes in the trees by dawn." What Karen didn't know, and what those impersonators were about to find out, was that this cabin wasn't just a peaceful retreat. It was a red zone fallback point built by a man trained to expect the worst and prepared to respond with the best. And lucky for me, the best weren't far away. As I locked the cabin down and scanned the tree line one last time before nightfall, I felt a familiar calm settle over me. The kind I used to feel before a breach operation. It wasn't fear. It was focus. Karen thought she could intimidate me with costumes and fake badges. But she didn't know who she was playing with. She didn't know the cabin was already surrounded, ChatGPT said. The morning came wrapped in fog, thick and heavy, curling around the trees like a living thing. From the front porch, I watched it roll over the lake, masking the stillness with a strange, quiet tension. Somewhere in that mist, something was brewing. I'd seen enough operations in my life to know that calm like this never lasted. It was the kind of morning where instincts prickled for no reason, except there was a reason this time. Karen's last move hadn't worked, so now she was playing dirty. I heard the engines before I saw the vehicles. Low growls, synchronized, deliberate, not loud enough to be careless, not quiet enough to be subtle. Through the fog emerged 3 black SUV, all matching models with identical light bars mounted on top. Unmarked, no license plates, no insignia, just matte black metal and tinted windows hiding whoever was inside. They pulled up slowly along my property's edge, wheels crunching over the gravel path. I stood still, coffee in hand, watching as 6 men stepped out, 3 from the first vehicle, 2 from the second, 1 from the third. All dressed in black tactical pants, utility belts with gear hanging off them like Christmas ornaments, and dark shirts marked with bold white letters that read HOA Tactical Division. HOA Tactical Division. I almost laughed, but my jaw clenched instead. It wasn't funny, it was dangerous. The lead guy had a walkie clipped to his vest and a radio piece in his ear. He was tall, wide-shouldered, and wearing aviator sunglasses even though the sun hadn't burned through the fog yet. The others flanked him like bodyguards. Their vests didn't have real police emblems, but they wore them with the swagger of people who thought they were untouchable. He stepped toward my porch and stopped a few feet from the steps. We've received multiple reports of unauthorized construction and structural code violations. He said flatly, as if reading from a script, "We're here to conduct an enforced property inspection on behalf of the Lakeside Community Homeowners Association." I didn't move. I let the silence stretch long enough to make him shift his weight. "You're not law enforcement," I said. "We are deputized by the HOA Board for Civilian Enforcement Actions," he replied, clearly pleased with the term he just made up. "You've got no jurisdiction here. This cabin is outside the HOA boundaries. You're trespassing." He pulled a folded paper from his vest pocket and waved it like it meant something. "This is an administrative override granted by the HOA Private Security Charter. It gives us authority to enforce compliance within a 5-mile buffer zone. That did it." I actually laughed. A private security charter with a buffer zone. Karen was officially off the deep end. And now she had these clowns playing soldier on my land. But laughing didn't make them less dangerous. These weren't rent-a-cops doing parking lot patrol. They moved like former military or wannabe SWAT. Armed, coordinated, and stupid enough to believe they were invincible. I let the mug hang loosely from my fingers and casually walked down the steps, past them, and toward the edge of the property. "Well, if you're going to violate federal law and impersonate officers," I said, "you might as well make yourselves comfortable." He blinked at that. "Excuse me," I looked him straight in the eye. "You're not the only ones watching this cabin." The radio on his chest crackled. "A coded message." He clicked it off quickly. The other men started glancing at the trees. One of them shifted his stance just a little, not enough for most people to notice. But I'd trained too many men like him not to catch it. They were getting nervous, they should have been. What Karen hadn't figured out was that my so-called retirement had been optional. I still trained active SWAT cadets in advanced tactical evasion, survival drills, and perimeter lockdown strategies. And this lake cabin, it had served as a training zone more times than I could count. My boys knew every inch of these woods. And when I told them to vanish into the trees and keep eyes on the target, they could sit camouflaged for hours without breathing loud enough to scare a squirrel. I gave no signal. I didn't have to. I could already feel their eyes watching from the tree line, their scopes locked on these 6 pretenders with every step they took. The lead guy leaned in just a hair too close. "This is your last warning. Cooperate, or we're authorized to enter by force. Try it," I said calmly. And then I smiled, just enough to let him know he was already surrounded. The fog hadn't lifted, but the air had shifted. There's a certain pressure you can feel before things break loose. The quiet before a door gets kicked in, the breath before a flashbang. I'd felt it in raids overseas, in cartel strongholds, and in inner city dens, and now I felt it again, right here at the lake. Except this time, I wasn't the one on the approach, I was the one being hunted, or so they thought. The so-called HOA Tactical Division didn't know they were walking into a live perimeter. My guys had already taken position the moment I hit send on that alert yesterday. They were ghosts in the woods, silent, patient, and fully equipped. Not one of them had to ask questions. Not one of them needed to be reminded what was at stake. We had all trained for operations just like this. Except now, it wasn't for a mission overseas. It was my home. The intruders didn't advance immediately. They gathered near the SUV, speaking quietly among themselves, probably checking in with Karen or whoever was running this little charade from behind the scenes. That gave my team more time to lock everything in. On the far ridge behind the cabin, Carson was already roosted with his long-range optic, eyes on every inch of my roofline and the dirt path winding up from the lake. I knew Brooks would have taken the creek line, hugging the underbrush. Meyer and Dev would be running counter-surveillance, setting up motion sensors and thermals just beyond the cabin's western slope. It was a closed loop now, no way in without being seen and no way out without being allowed. I walked slowly back up to the porch, just as calm as I'd ever been, and sat down like it was any other morning. Coffee still warm, birds still chirping somewhere deep in the trees. The lead impersonator glanced back over his shoulder, probably wondering why I wasn't flinching, why I hadn't called for help. The truth was, help was already here, and it had teeth. The radio on my hip crackled softly. Eyes on 6, spread wide, no one else visible. Carson reported, voice low, almost a whisper, permission to tag if they breach, hold. I said quietly, pressing my earpiece. Brooks came in next, got too near the tool shed trying to peek in the window. Do you want them lit up with the deterrent light? Not yet. Let them keep thinking they're in charge. It's a strange thing, watching people pretend to be something they're not. These guys clearly thought their black tactical gear and matching SUV made them invincible. Maybe they'd done this before. Maybe they'd gotten away with it, shaking down residents too timid to push back. But this wasn't one of Karen's cookie-cutter neighbors. This was me, and I had built this entire cabin with one thing in mind: containment. The front door was reinforced steel, masked by rustic wood. The windows all double-paned security glass. There were concealed motion cameras in the wind chimes, a ground sensor under the gravel path, and a retractable steel plate in the floor just beneath the entry mat. That last one was a failsafe, triggered only in worst-case scenarios. I didn't think I'd need it, but knowing it was there kept me calm. The lead impersonator motioned for his men to spread out. 2 circled around back, 1 lingered near the generator shack. 1 walked straight up the steps to the porch where I was still seated, arms resting on the chair's wooden arms, unarmed but far from undefended. You've been warned, we're conducting this inspection. Step aside. No. His face twitched. You're obstructing an official operation. You're impersonating federal authority. He shifted slightly, 1 hand resting near his hip. It wasn't subtle, it was a threat. That's when the air snapped. A small red dot flickered on his chest. Just 1, but that's all it took. He looked down, froze. Another dot appeared on his partner by the generator shack. Then another, on the one near the back gate. I didn't even have to say a word. His hand moved away from his belt. You're surrounded, I said calmly. My team doesn't miss, and they don't speak twice. He tried to act brave, but the look in his eyes said everything. He hadn't expected resistance. Not like this. They thought they were the predators. Now they realized they were prey. I stood up slowly and walked past him again. You can walk away right now, but if you step inside that cabin, this turns federal. No one moved. Not a breath, not a word. Operation Lake Storm had begun, and the storm wasn't just coming, it was already here. The tension was thick enough to slice with a combat knife. Not a soul moved. The man on my porch, the supposed leader of this little tactical farce, stood paralyzed in the glow of that red laser on his chest. He didn't know who had the trigger. or how many more dots were floating on him from angles he couldn't even imagine. He only knew one thing: he wasn't in control anymore. From the tree line, the forest swallowed everything: sound, movement, even fear. But hidden inside that silence was precision, years of training. My team didn't posture, didn't threaten. They calculated. Every breath taken by those impersonators had already been counted. My former unit wasn't just watching, they were ready to act. And if these guys so much as sneezed in the wrong direction, it would be over in under 30 seconds. The man slowly raised his hands, but his eyes were still searching, scanning, looking for a way to flip this back in his favor. That was the problem with fake power: it folds fast when met with the real thing. One of the others called out from behind the cabin, trying to maintain control. "We're within our rights to enter this property." I didn't even have to respond. Maya's voice cut through the comms directly into my ear. "Back gates locked down, 2 tagged, 1 jittery. They make a move, I'll freeze them." I stepped off the porch and faced the 6. There's no law here that gives you power. No charter, no badge, no backup. And that HOA logo on your sleeve, that's not going to stop what's coming next. I pointed to the fake officer standing closest to the generator shack. "You, step forward. Let's see that badge." He hesitated. Just for a moment, that was enough. A single chirp echoed from the tree line, and instantly a bright green beam of light, non-lethal, tactical, grade, shone down from the ridge, lighting up his vest and blinding him momentarily. He dropped the badge and shielded his eyes. I stepped forward, picked up the ID, and held it in my hand. Laminated plastic, no state seal, no signature, just bold letters and a cheap clip. "Fake," I said, tossing it back at his boots. He looked at the others. One of them reached for a walkie. "No comms," I said. "Try it and the line goes dead. We've jammed your frequency." He froze, hand in midair. That was the moment I saw it, the first crack in their confidence. These weren't trained law enforcement officers. They were muscle, for hire, playing dress-up in uniforms stitched by fear and entitlement, and someone, Karen, had paid them well to execute a mission they were totally unprepared for. I took a step closer to the leader. "You're trespassing, impersonating officers, and coordinating an armed incursion on private property. You know what that means, right?" He didn't answer. "It means you're done, every one of you." The woods behind them rustled. A figure emerged, tall, lean, geared in tactical camo, rifle slung low. Brooks. He walked like a panther across the gravel path. Slow and smooth, weapon held but not aimed. "Tags confirmed," Brooks said, nodding to me. "All 6 marked, comm records logged. We've got voice prints, body cam feed, and facial recognition ready to match." The fake cops started to fidget. One turned like he might run. "You run, you drop," Brooks said flatly. That was enough to keep their boots glued to the ground. I walked past the SUV and looked inside one. Open maps, printed photos of the cabin, and a list. My name was on it. So were a few others' neighbors, people who'd pushed back against HOA demands. This wasn't just about me. This was a hit list. My radio clicked again. Deb's voice this time. Karen's inbound, golf cart, coming up the back trail, alone. Of course she was. Karen wouldn't miss the show. She probably expected to show up just in time for my arrest. Smug grin, camera phone in hand, ready to gloat. But what she was walking into was a collapse. I turned back to the 6 fakes. "You want to avoid federal prison? Drop your gear, hands on your heads, and sit. Now." One by one, they obeyed. By the time Karen's squeaky little golf cart rolled into view, her boys were kneeling in a line, hands behind their heads, surrounded by professionals she couldn't even see yet. Her jaw dropped the second she laid eyes on the scene. She opened her mouth to speak, but the moment for talking was long gone. This wasn't her HOA world anymore. This was mine, and justice was about to get real. Karen's golf cart rolled to a halt like it was the chariot of some petty queen arriving at her throne. Her sunglasses were too large for her face, and her lips were twisted into that familiar smug smile that always meant trouble. She hadn't yet processed the sight before her. The 6 men she'd sent were no longer standing tall in tactical gear. They were kneeling on the gravel like schoolboys caught cheating, their fake weapons laid out on the grass, hands locked behind their heads. Her engine sputtered off, silence fell, the smile vanished. What is going on here?" she demanded, stepping off the cart with the dramatics of a daytime soap opera villain. "You know exactly what's going on," I said, standing in the center of the group, arms crossed. She hesitated, glanced around, eyes darting to the tree line like she suddenly realized how many shadows were watching her. Karen wasn't used to being watched. She was used to doing the watching, but now the tables had turned, and she was feeling the heat. "I demand an explanation," she snapped, pointing a shaking finger at me. These men were authorized to carry out a security operation under the HOA safety initiative. "No, they weren't," I said calmly. "They were hired thugs dressed up to look like officers, and they're facing some serious federal charges now, impersonating law enforcement, attempted unlawful entry, conspiracy, trespassing, even targeted harassment." She laughed nervously. "Oh please, this is all a misunderstanding. I was told they were professionals, contracted for safety purposes, that's all." "Then, why do you have a printed dossier in one of their trucks with my name on it, and a list of other cabin owners who refused to follow your buffer zone policies?" Her mouth opened and closed like a fish flopping on dry land. Brooks stepped forward from the woods with a small flash drive in his gloved hand. "All 6 had bodycams running. We've copied the footage. They mentioned your name 8 times. They said you authorized this op, paid in cash, and told them not to worry about local law because the HOA handles its own problems." Karen's face turned a shade of white I didn't know skin could manage. That's ridiculous. They're lying to protect themselves." I shook my head. "They didn't know we were recording from the woods. We've got every word, every plan, every step of your little operation, Karen. You hired these guys to break into my cabin. You lied to them and told them they had jurisdiction. You put them in danger. And now you're trying to run from it." She turned to run. For a second I saw panic win. She took one desperate step back toward the cart, but Dev was already behind her. "Not a good idea," he said softly, stepping out from the brush with quiet authority. "You're not going anywhere." Karen froze, her posture collapsing into a strange mix of indignation and fear. "You can't do this to me," she hissed. "I'm the president of the HOA." "Not anymore," I said. "You just got impeached by reality." She stood there, seething, hands trembling. She didn't speak again. By the time the sheriff's department arrived, called by Maya, once we had the fake cops restrained and Karen detained, the fog had lifted. Sunlight poured over the scene like some divine spotlight, exposing every ugly truth that had been hiding in the shadows. Deputies arrived in force, recognizing a few faces right away. Some of the impersonators had been involved in prior shady security patrols, but had always slipped through because no one had evidence until now. Now, we had more than enough to press charges. The sheriff took one look at Karen and sighed like a man who'd been waiting for this day for years. "She's finally gone too far," he muttered. "We warned her." She tried to protest as they cuffed her, still clinging to some delusion of power. "This is all a mistake. He's behind this. He staged this entire thing." But no one believed her, not anymore. As the SUV were impounded, the fake cops hauled off and Karen loaded into the back of a real patrol car. I turned back to my cabin. It stood untouched, still solid, still mine. For the first time in a long while, the lake was silent again, but not in the eerie way it had been the day before. This was peaceful silence, the kind that follows justice, the kind of silence Karen would be hearing a lot more of from a jail cell.